Okay, so we're recording the session and that will be available later on down the road. I wanted to welcome you to Exploring ISTE Standards, Roadmap for Bold Educators. My name is Susie Becking and I teach at Fort Hays State University. And I also have Arlia Carmack helping me today. She's our moderator. And so this Q&A link that's showing here is a Q&A doc. And so if you have any questions and would like to just post those, I would appreciate if you would add in your name and your email as well as the question. And we'll take a look at that. I'll leave this screen up for a minute because I want you to be able to get into this presentation, and then I will move to the into the presentation. So as we look at ISTE, it's the International Society for Technology and Education, and most of you probably know that. That's probably why you're here. ISTE is the foremost organization for promoting technology in education, and I really believe that it provides the why as well as the how of technology integration in the classroom. And ISTE has issued an invitation to be bold with us, dreaming big, transforming teaching, empowering learners. And I remember when I finished my PhD, my advisor introduced me to a group of people as someone who was focused on pedagogy. And I remember how surprised I was hearing that because we'd never really had that conversation. But as I reflected on it, I realized that even back then I was looking at teaching and learning and the strategies that we use in the classroom to deepen learning in our students. And I was convinced that technology, if properly integrated, could be a key to just deeper learning. And that interest in pedagogy using technology made me interested in exploring the ISTE standards. I didn't know much about ISTE at the time. I knew they had the National Education Technology Standards, the NETS standards. And beyond that, I really didn't know a whole lot. So hopefully you're in these, you are in this session or this presentation, and I'm going to show again the check-in and ask you to participate in that. So you just type in tinyurl.com/Y9E7SUUA, and you will get to that form. And I'm going to continue on. So why ISTE? Who is ISTE? ISTE is one of the foremost organizations in teaching technology in the classroom or for the classroom. And they have several levels of standards. They have the standards for educators, the standards for education leaders, for students, for coaches, for computer science. I know that many of you experienced the COVID-19 home learning setting. And for some of you, my guess is that that went pretty well. Some of you maybe even thrived in that situation. Others of you probably struggled. And I know many students and families were challenged by the experiences. My own daughter is among them. My students talked about how they were able to participate in and sometimes take the lead in providing support and tutorials for their colleagues to help students and to help the parents at home get through that learning. So that's why I want to look at the ISTE standards. The standards map out a blueprint for re-engineering schools in the classroom. They help support digital age learning. And the standards for students help build a footprint to guide student learning from elementary through high school and beyond. They instill digital citizenship and responsibility in students. And I'm an educator, I'm a facilitator, I'm a coach. I have a lot of different roles, as you do too. And my students are also educators. I teach instructional technology and instructional design. And those are master's students. And so our questions have been for our program is how to implement the ISTE standards in our master's courses. And one of the things that we did early on was to look at how could they be maybe even a program learning outcome, since there are really no industry standards that are consistent for this area. And there's not even a consistent job description. I know many of you here are a technology integrationist or a technology integration specialist or an instructional coach or an instructional technologist. And there's just all kinds of different ways of looking at this role. And so I'm uh, I'm excited to see standards that will help support each of these areas and support the various job descriptions. And so that's why we went with ISTE standards for this, because they just seem to fit. It seemed best to use the educator standards, but also to familiarize our students with the student standards so that they could use them in their curriculum implementation. So I go between these sets of standards. And when I was thinking about this session, one of the things that stood out was change agent in the coaches standards. That coaches inspire educators and leaders to use technology to create equitable and ongoing access to high quality learning. And that's what I want to do today, to inspire, just to maybe prod you to take a closer look at what the ISTE standards have to offer, and to see how they would fit in with what you're doing in the classroom. I'm not sure about you, but I feel a tug often between the old and the new. My advisor and I, my doc advisor and I, several years ago had a plan to write an article. We never finished it. We do have a lot of it done, but it was to be titled something like Old Tools on New Students. Because we're not living in that same world that we lived in the past. And I can't believe that it's 2020 and we're still talking about this. But how do I need to adapt as an educator to better serve the students I'm privileged to work with? And I love George Couros. He has a blog, and I think it's very good. But he talked about educators are working harder than ever, but I wonder if sometimes we're getting better at the wrong things. Our system was designed for a different era where standardization was the goal, and as a result is not intended to develop the skills our students need to be successful today. And I'm sure you've heard hundreds of different quotes like that. And yet I still see that pull and that tug in schools for teachers. As I mentioned, my students are teachers, and often they talk about just how they want to do this and they're equipped to do this and they have the technology to do it, but the administrators just don't see the value. And so we need to reach all levels of educators in understanding the standards. I want to put you to work here. And what I'd like to have you do is click on this or type in this URL and go to a document where I would like you to sign up for a group. And this is what the document looks like. And I know it'll be a little bit of a free-for-all right now, but if you would just type your name in to one of the groups, there's several of them. And then once you're done typing your name in, click that Activity 1 collaboration doc that's at the bottom of your group and begin to type there. If you still need some links, I think Arlia is posting them in the chat. So thank you, Arlia. And while you do that, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to get in there. It may not even take you that long, but I have this little puppy that's going to bark in about 9 minutes and 53 seconds.
No, what the hell, man? Blaze. Blaze. What are you barking at? What you doing, Blazy? What's up, Blaze? Is there a bird you didn't like? Hi. How are you? What?
Okay, we have about 5 more minutes. I may not take that long. There are some people still typing here, so give it a couple more. Okay, I think things are slowing down a little bit, so oops, I think we'll stop our puppy and come on back to the session.
Welcome in.
Thank you for doing that. I like thinking kind of in the broad terms first, and I really like what some of you said. Pardon me for looking away, but I have several windows and several devices here. One group talked about apathy. The environment is not suitable for a student's way of learning. Teacher not having a love for students, not being willing to develop relationships with students. Boy, is that a big one. Teachers as staff not being confident in one another's abilities. Lack of scaffolding for students who may need it. And take a look at even what some of the other groups wrote, if you have a chance, because I think that it's really helpful to look at just a number of things in a brainstorming session. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I'm going to go back and look when we get done with this. Right now, let's keep on moving here. ISTE standards were developed by a number of groups. They put together groups of parents, educators, students, industry leaders, and they formed groups to discuss the direction and the wording and the implementation of each level of the standards. And I really appreciate that. It wasn't just, one group sitting up there saying this is how it should be. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with ISTE standards and kind of the progression of it, it began in 1998 with the NET standards, the National Education Technology Standards, which was touted by the Department of Education at the time and for the years following. And in that, what they were looking at is learning to use technology. So they wanted to focus on the technology skills. They wanted to promote technology in their classroom and to allow people to learn the skills of technology. And 9 years later, they revamped the standards, and they set it up so it would be looking at more at using technology to learn. So they felt like, okay, we've learned the skills. We know how to use the skills. Now, how are we going to use these skills and this technology to learn? And then 9 years later, in 2016, they started talking about transformative learning with technology. And I really love that progression because I think it really shows where society is, where our culture is in terms of what we need to be focusing on today. And again, going back to the situation that we've had the last 3 months, I see it as imperative that we really have that transformative learning with technology focus as we move through this time. And so again, this is just giving a little bit of the details of how the standards were developed. But what these standards do and what this progression does is it empowers us as educators as a guide to create courses, to participate in course activities, to give us direction. At the annual ISTE conference about 2018, we were introduced to the opportunity to become ISTE certified educators. And one of my colleagues and I did that. We looked at the process and we thought, yeah, we can do this. So didn't realize what we were getting ourselves into, I think, at the time. And there may be some of you out there who are ISTE certified as well. But we did a 2-day face-to-face in Austin, Texas. We had 9 weeks of online training and followed by a digital portfolio that we were to put together that showed how we met each of the 24 indicators for the ISTE standard. And so ISTE educator standards have 7 standards, and each one has 3 to 4 indicators under it. And so that makes up the 24. And that was a grueling task, really a good one. It was good for me because it was taking a really deep dive and a deep look at what I do. And am I really meeting these standards? And there were a few that I had to say, probably not. And then I've made some changes on as a result of that. One of the things that we hear about a lot is students driving their own learning, understanding that they're responsible for their learning and that kind of thing. I put these words on this page because that's part of sensory learning as well. But the word that stands out to me the most is curiosity, because I believe that curiosity drives learning. And I asked myself, how do the ISTE standards promote these qualities? All of them: communication, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and those are just a few. One of the things that you see in the ISTE standards for students is that it talks about digital citizenship. It talks about constructing knowledge, computational thinking, innovative designer, creative communicator, global collaborator. And so there are a lot of words there that have meaning and have deep meaning, and that we need to take a look at as we are developing our learning, developing our activities in the classroom. This is just indicative of a book that I read recently. It's called The Signals Are Talking by Amy Webb. And Amy Webb is a futurist. And so she takes a look at the past and how the past shaped the present and how it's shaping the future. And one of the things she talked about is, are we really seeing the signals? Because she looked at some of gave some examples for that. And BlackBerry was one of them. I don't know if you're old enough to remember BlackBerries, but I had them. And BlackBerry had 70% of the market back in, I don't know, 2000 to 2005, maybe. I'm not even sure when that was. They were a real status symbol. And this spring, this is what I read about BlackBerry: that BlackBerry's Android smartphones will stop being sold in August 2020. So they did make a comeback. They decided that they needed to revamp something, but they aren't there yet. On January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs announced the first iPhone at the Macworld convention. And this received substantial media attention, as do all of the Apple products introductions. And Jobs announced that it would come out later that year. And June 29th, it came out. And BlackBerry CEO just couldn't fathom that this little 4-inch object could do what Jobs said, even a fraction of what his BlackBerry was capable of. He didn't take it seriously. And so that was the problem with, I'm sorry, I'm having to let people in here. And that was the problem with moving forward for him. The other example that Amy Webb gives is the yellow cab. 1939 in New York City, they had 11,787 certificates for yellow cab, and that meant that there were a possibility of having that many cabs out on the road at any particular time. 78 years later, in 2017, they only had 13,270. They failed to look at the signs, and that was their downfall. And so I guess the message that Amy Webb will want to say is, are we ignoring the signs? What are the signs today of what we can take a look at in the future? As I mentioned, I teach instructional technology and instructional design, and that the ISTE standards are our standards for our program. And so we ask what we ask our students to do is to use the ISTE standards for educators if they fit their role. If they're in the classroom, if they're not in the classroom, they can use the COACHES standards or the computer science standards, whatever fits their role. And so they're asked to do that and to identify during each assignment or discussion what standard would best fit that area. And then when they create their instruction for their students, they create based on the student standards. And then during our capstone problem, capstone course, they look at identifying the coaches' standards for their capstone activities. And I just wanted to show you a couple of the things that that I've seen in my classroom. And all I can do is share what I've seen and just how it's worked for us, because that's kind of where I live. But in this one class, I've asked the students to to read about pedagogy and use of technology in the classroom, because I'm looking at the difference between using technology and integrating technology. And so then I've asked them to create a meme that shows their thinking on pedagogy and on teaching strategies. And so this is one that was created just this spring. And I think you can read what it says, but the student said, my meme focused on student-centered learning. And what she did was she identified the ISTE Educator Standard 5B, which was designer, and B says design authentic learning activities that align with content area standards and use digital tools and resources to maximize active deep learning. If you go and look at the ISTE standards, what you'll see in ISTE standards for educators is, well, for all of them, they open up, they expand, and they let you see each of the indicators. And in each indicator, it is kind of a description of how to unpack that standard. And so each one has a few words that maybe they have a pop out, and you can take a look at, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by this? And so it really unpacks that standard for you. And that's one of the things that this does, is it talks about authentic learning activities. It talks about active deep learning. And that's really helpful as you're using these to create. One thing that I see from students is that there's a shift from when they come into the program from wanting to create technology-based activities to present to their students, and it moves to wanting to engage their students. And then even further at the end of the program, I see a majority wanting to empower their students, to help them not only learn with technology, but to create projects and that show their learning and their technology, and to take control of their learning. So technology isn't the focus, learning is. Pretty presentations is not the focus, learning is. Empowering students means that you give them voice and you give them choice and control of their learning. So another example, well, this is something that I've heard about several times, about just one teacher wanting to do an art activity. And so she talked about, okay, we're going to do art today and we're going to draw. And so the little boy got all excited about drawing, and he thought he could draw a house and draw his yard and draw a dog in front and draw a pasture with a cow and a horse and a goat. And the teacher said, and we're going to draw a flower. And so he kind of shifted his thinking and thought, okay, I'll draw a rose because I really like roses. And she says, and it's going to be a daisy. And he thought, well, my mom got a bouquet the other day of daisies, and she had all colors in it. And I think I'll draw a pink daisy for my mom. And the teacher says, a white daisy with a yellow center. And I know that that's an extreme example, but I think it has happened in the past. And so what, sorry, I'm trying to silence my phone and it's not silencing. And so what we need to be mostly consumed with is not necessarily what makes it easy for us as graders or as evaluators, but more how can I encourage that creativity in my students, and in helping that come out. This is another assignment that I've done in classes, creating an avatar. And in that creation of the avatar, they're supposed to create one that kind of describes them, that looks like them, that kind of thing. And then talk about its potential significance to teaching and learning. So not just creating the avatar, but also looking at what is its potential significance. And one of my students said, I think this would be an excellent activity to do with my students. It would allow them to incorporate themselves into their own projects and also make them feel as though they were part of the learning. I tend to use my students' names when writing word problems, and I think they would love to see their avatar on the screen acting out the problem. It would certainly make them more engaged and also help them visualize the problem. And I really liked that because I think it described what I like seeing of the activities that they create in their classroom. These are a couple of comments that students have made in a couple of my classes, but one said, one of the biggest takeaways that I have from all of the online courses I've been engaged in at Fort Hays is that sharing and collaborating are incredibly valuable pieces of the learning puzzle. In the past, I've been reticent to provide students with the time and resources to collaborate or share due to the thought that this time would be wasted and that direct instruction would be a much more valuable use of my time. I've since come to realize that sharing and effective collaboration are the building blocks for authentic and meaningful creativity. And I really like that, again, because it does show just that I guess commitment to the basis of what students can be involved in learning. Another student said, I was just having a conversation with a colleague about teaching the why. So many of my colleagues are engaged in the 19th century top-down compliance-driven model of lecture and regurgitation. Your ideas about relationship building struck home. This is actually in response to another student. Relationships, connections can be hard to make in a completely online environment. I'm glad you brought it up, but as it is something I wanted to think about when writing my discussion post, or I didn't think about when writing my discussion post. So again, he was responding to another student, and I really liked how that came out. Okay, I want to take a little bit of time here to look at a Jamboard and to take a look at some of the ISTE standards and how can we create activities that would be based on these standards. And so what I've done is created the Jamboard. I'm going to show you it. Again, you go to the, not sure what happened to this. Okay. Something happened to our groups. But anyway, groups 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all in the same Jamboard. So if you're in group 1, 2, 3, or 4, you can go down to groups 3 or 4 and click on activity 2. If you're in group 3, 4, 5, 6, you'll be in one Jamboard as well. And I don't think we have anybody in the other 4. So there are two Jamboards. So there'll be several of you on the Jamboard. But I want you to see what it looks like here on the screen. You're probably already there. One of the things that I noticed, looks like we've got sticky notes going all over the place. One thing I want you to notice, though, is that this is a sticky note, and this is the standard. So I just like for you to create a sticky note from this little fourth icon down, if you've never been on Jamboard before, and create a sticky note and share ideas for this standard. So this one is Student Standard 1. If you want to go to Student Standard 2, you can take a look at Screen 2, and this just goes right here. I'm clicking the wrong screen. And there are some that are already there. So the thing in the teal color is the standard. Some of them are not fully spelled out, and if you want to see them, you can double click on them and you can see them. So I will let you go ahead and do that, and I'm going to probably give you about 5 minutes for this activity. Here we have about less than 5 minutes left. Okay, I think we'll come back. I don't see a whole lot of activity anymore on the Jamboards, unless I'm missing one. Um, looks like the majority of you were in group 1 through 4 Jamboard, which is great. And we got quite a few just fun comments from this. I just wanted to look at a couple of them. I probably should start with the first standard instead of the 7th. So the first standard is empowered learner, and in that we had ideas for creating choice boards, letting students choose between similar lessons, teaching the same or similar concepts, choice and self-direction, have a list of apps for student learning posted, have students choose the apps they want to use to post what they learned, and then share with the other groups how they used it, work in groups. Students learning new tools and teaching the class how to use them as well. I love that idea, teaching the class to use them as well. These are all great. Flipped classroom model. For the second standard on digital citizen, we have ideas on students engaging using social media to solve real problems in either globally or in their community, and discussion boards on Padlet. Padlet will do, well, it'll do a little bit differently than this, but you can use that for the sticky notes as well. Bitmoji, bit strips are great for graphic novel cartoon. I've just recently run across that myself, and I really like that idea. And let's see, Google Forms to gather data, code.org, curriculum, and other free codes. This is for computational thinking. Creative communicator using Flipgrid so that students express what they are thinking about, plus see how others might tackle solving problems differently. I used Flipgrid for one class the last 2 semesters, and I've loved it. It's just been a reflection assignment, but they're looking back at kind of some questions about the project that they created and how it worked out for them. And I really like that, just that whole experience for my students, and they were talking about using it for theirs. In fact, many of them had already used it for theirs. So there are some really good ideas here. And one thing I think Dina Delaray has a session tomorrow on Jamboard. So if you want to take a deeper dive into Jamboard, you might check out her session. I think it's at 11 tomorrow. And I think that would be a great one to take in. Okay, well, thank you for doing some work here and taking a look at this. But you guys are teachers. You all know how to meet standards by activities and how to dig deeper into those. I did have one question on the question and answer doc, and it was about how to get more involved with ISTE. And I do have a link, a couple links, in fact, later on in the session, in the presentation, what I'm trying to say, a couple slides down, and I'll show you that when I get there. This is a statement by one of my students from his last semester. And as he was creating his portfolio and reflecting on it, this is what he said about implementing the ISTE standards. He said, as I continued to apply the ISTE standards, I started to understand their purpose more. ISTE standards are a way of approaching the job. What is done needs to be researched, shared, modeled, important, designed well, and reevaluated. Being a leader means being informed and sharing and modeling. Learning needs to be designed well, important, and constantly reevaluated so students can succeed. The ISTE standards help with the entire process, knowing what one should be doing to benefit everyone involved. And I liked his thinking on that. I think that it was just a good reflection on his experience as well as on what ISTE standards can do. So looking at the ISTE standards again, we're not talking about content standards. They're not discipline specific, because content standards describe the what content and discipline specific skills do these students need to learn in my class. And then the ISTE standards would describe the how, the way technology might help students and teachers address specific learning goals and amplify learning regardless of the content area or the grade level. And so we need to keep that in mind. Just the differences there. And this is a quote in a book titled The Technology-Powered School. It's a book that was written by an instructor at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And what it does is it takes a look at what are some of the quick ways that a principal can come into the building in the morning and get caught up on their technology and kind of direction and what's going on. And one of the principals made this statement: to be a principal in the 21st century school demands leadership of technology. To be a leader of technology requires a willingness to learn, flexibility, and the capability to accept change as a constant factor. Adaptability and acceptance of ambiguity are essential because technology changes continually. There is no menu of technology must-dos and must-haves. Instead, leaders of technology must be lifelong learners and explorers of the new, the exciting, and the useful in technology. And again, this was a principal that was talking about this. There are a couple of books that I really recommend. This technology, Leading the Technology-Powered School, is good for principals. Digital Leadership and Uncommon Learning by Eric Sheninger are two very good ones, just to kind of give a better, a good perspective on what could be changed in our schools. And one of the questions that I ask myself when I'm looking at quotes like this, as well as, reading books and that kind of thing, is, are we doing enough? In higher ed, am I providing students who are teachers the tools to lead in this area? I also want to ask this of principals and teachers about technology integration and change and pedagogical approach in the classroom, because I want all levels, and I believe it starts in higher ed because we're the ones that are educating teachers, but we need to be educated a little bit better in that as well, and not just go for the theory and but take a look at the practice as well. And so the question that I want to leave with you today is, are we doing enough? And I hope that it's something that that you begin to explore a little bit more. The ISTE standards can be found at iste.org/standards. And again, there are all levels of standards there. Here's a check-in link. Here is the feedback form link on this last page. So if you would please provide feedback for my session. And then I have on this last screen, I'll come back to this session. There's information on becoming ISTE certified. And This one, let me just read the URL. It's tinyurl.com/Y8TZ8POG. And you can find that information. I believe it's well worth the time to do that. As an educator, and especially in the schools, I really think that the problem is it does cost money, and now it has been provided online. So there's online. The first 2 face-to-face sessions are online. Okay, let me go back to this other one so you can get the feedback form, and I ask that you would fill that out and give us some feedback for this session. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for participating in the Jamboard, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.